Hello everyone and welcome to my channel Y&R Trends. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Adam Newman never expected the world he knew to collapse in a single instant, but the young and the restless had been building toward a secret so deep, so emotionally loaded, and so devastating that when the truth finally broke, it shattered not only Adam's heart, but the fragile balance of nearly every relationship he had fought to rebuild. It all began quietly, with Connor acting strange, not just the usual emotional turmoil the boy had been going through since his struggles at school and his difficulty coping with the complicated dynamics of his parents' lives, but something deeper, something physical that the doctors noticed before either Adam or Chelsea realized what was happening, and that led to test after test until a genetic panel revealed anomalies that did not match Adam's DNA profile. And though the medical staff tried to approach the conversation carefully, cautiously, professionally, because this was delicate territory even for a soap opera world where secrets were currency, there was no way to drop the news without sending shockwaves through the room, leaving Adam stunned, confused, trying to process how his son's DNA could show markers that didn't line up with his own. The hospital thought it might be a lab error at first, and Adam, stubborn and confident, insisted it had to be, because his mind would not even entertain the possibility that Connor might not be his biological child. But as the tests were rerun, once, twice, 3 more times, the results came back the same every single time, undeniable and unchangeable, and Adam could feel the floor drop beneath him, yet he refused to break in front of the medical professionals, demanding explanations, his voice sharp and laced with panic, while inside he replayed every memory he'd ever had with Connor, every moment that defined their bond, from the first time he'd held him as a newborn to the many battles he'd fought to be in his son's life. And now, in the span of minutes, science was suggesting that everything he believed about his son's identity could be wrong. But the worst part came when Chelsea, quiet, tense, and visibly unraveling, finally asked the doctors to give them a moment alone, and the look in her eyes told Adam the truth before she ever spoke a word, the kind of expression that only appears when someone knows they're about to destroy the person they love. And while Adam demanded answers, Chelsea's throat tightened because she had carried this secret for years, convincing herself that burying it forever was the best thing for everyone, but now she couldn't outrun it anymore. With the medical truth undeniable, Chelsea had no choice but to confess the past she had spent so many nights trying to erase, starting with the story Adam never heard, the night long ago before they fully reunited, when resentment, distance, and uncertainty pushed her into the arms of another man, Matt, a name that had floated through Genoa City in whispers but never with the weight it suddenly carried. Because the truth Chelsea had kept locked away was that during a period when she and Adam were apart, when their lives were fractured and she didn't believe reconciliation was possible, she had slept with Matt, and shortly afterward discovered she was pregnant, but unable to face the judgment, the questions, or the possibility of losing everything that she hoped could be repaired with Adam, she made a decision on her own, deciding that Connor would be Adam's no matter what biology said, because Adam had fought for that child before he was even born. And because she feared that revealing the truth back then would ruin any remaining chance she had of rebuilding her relationship with Adam. As Chelsea spoke, every word landed like a blade, and Adam's face transformed with a mix of hurt, disbelief, betrayal, and emotional paralysis, because he wasn't just being told that the son he had raised for years might not be biologically his. He was learning that Chelsea knew all along and intentionally kept the truth from him. She explained how the doctors originally hadn't run extensive DNA checks at birth, how no situation required it at the time, how she rationalized that biology didn't matter if love did, and how desperately she had clung to the idea that she could rewrite reality by simply never acknowledging the alternative. And though she spoke with tears, shame, and regret flooding her voice, Adam could barely hear her beyond the roaring in his ears because he had always clung to Connor as his anchor. The child who reminded him that even when he made mistakes, he could still be a father capable of love, protection, and redemption. Now that foundation was crumbling, and Adam demanded to know every detail. When she found out why she never told him, how she could justify stealing the truth from him for all these years, and Chelsea, swallowing back sobs, admitted she was terrified, not only of losing Adam's trust but of losing the life she wanted for Connor, feeling that Adam was the better father, the stronger foundation, and that Matt, for all his role in the story, could never provide what Adam could. But that admission only enraged Adam further, because he could not accept that someone else had made choices about his life and his child without him, and the idea that he had been living a lie for years shredded his composure. He slammed his fist against the wall, struggling to contain the tidal wave of frustration, betrayal, and heartbreak, and asked Chelsea if Matt even knew the truth, and her silence was answer enough, because she had kept Connor's parentage from Matt as well, making the secret bigger and more dangerous than Adam imagined. And that sent another wave of nausea through him, realizing the chain of lies didn't just affect their little family. It had implications that could spread through Genoa City like wildfire if the truth got out, and in soap opera fashion, truth always gets out, usually in the worst way possible. Adam pushed away from her, pacing, trying to breathe through the suffocating sense of loss, because biologically real or not, Connor was still his son in every way that mattered. But now Adam had to confront the painful reality that genetics change everything legally, emotionally, and socially, and that the rest of the Newman family would have strong opinions once they learned the truth, especially Victor, who had fought bitter wars over bloodlines, legacy, and succession, and who would not take kindly to discovering that the child Adam believed would carry the Newman name into the next generation was not technically his heir. Adam anticipated the explosive reaction, imagining Victor's mix of cold calculation, shock, and pointed disappointment, and the humiliation only amplified Adam's inner torment, as he realized that Chelsea had not just lied to him. She had set him up for one of the greatest personal crises of his life. Chelsea kept pleading with him to understand, to see that she never wanted to hurt him, that she believed love could outweigh biology, but Adam was beyond rational hearing. His mind replaying every moment of Connor's growth. First steps, school achievements, emotional struggles, bedtime conversations, shared victories, and wondering how many of those moments might have played out differently if he had known the truth. The fear also crept in. Would Connor want a relationship with Matt when he learned the truth? Would Adam be replaced? Would the boy he raised see him differently? Would everything he had built crumble overnight? Because Adam could survive losing jobs, power struggles, corporate battles, romantic failures, but the one thing he could never imagine losing was his son, and now through a secret he never asked to be part of, that was a real possibility. Chelsea, sensing Adam's spiraling thoughts, tried to explain that she didn't think Matt deserved a direct role, that he had been part of her life briefly and was never emotionally invested the way Adam was. But even that reasoning sounded hollow to Adam, because she had made that choice for everyone, denying Matt the truth, denying Connor the truth, and denying Adam the knowledge of his own family. Adam stared at her with an expression that mixed grief with something darker, resentment, and the feeling that Chelsea, perhaps more than Victor or any Newman rival, had dealt the most personal blow he had ever suffered. And while she begged him to speak, Adam's voice broke when he finally said that she didn't just lie about Connor's biology. She stole the choice from him, something no one had ever taken from him at this scale. Chelsea tried to reach for him, but Adam stepped back, needing space to breathe because his entire reality was crashing around him, and Chelsea, still sobbing, admitted that she always knew this moment could come, but she prayed it never would, prayed that their love, their bond, and the life they built would keep the truth buried. But Adam told her that secrets never die in Genoa City, that the universe always makes them surface at the worst possible time, and now everyone would pay for the lie she engineered. As the room fell into heavy silence, the emotional weight sat between them like a concrete wall, and Adam realized he couldn't stay there another second, needing air, space, and distance before the intensity crushed what little sanity he had left. So he told Chelsea he was leaving. Not forever, not in finality, but because if he didn't walk away, he might say something he could never take back, and with that, he stormed out, leaving Chelsea trembling in the hospital room, terrified not just of losing Adam, but of what would happen when the rest of Genoa City learned the truth, because in that world, secrets always explode into scandal, alliances shift overnight, and emotional devastation never remains contained between two people. And as Adam stepped into the corridor, his breath shaking, he realized the next battle he faced wouldn't just be between him and Chelsea. It would be between who he had been as a father and the man he would have to become in the aftermath of a truth that changed everything forever. Adam didn't know where he was going when he walked out of the hospital, only that he needed to get away from the suffocating weight of betrayal that clung to him like smoke after an explosion, the kind that turns everything darker before the flames even settle. And as he stepped out into the cool Genoa City air, the world around him felt unreal, people passing by unaware that his entire identity as a father had just been uprooted. And in the midst of his numb disbelief, his phone buzzed relentlessly with missed calls and texts from Chelsea, but Adam ignored them, needing silence and space more than explanations, because the truth had already been laid bare and nothing Chelsea could say in words would dull the sting of 13 years of deception. So instead he found himself drifting toward crimson lights, drawn by habit more than intention, wanting to sit somewhere familiar, somewhere normal, somewhere that didn't feel like a stage collapsing under him. And as he stepped inside, Sharon recognized him immediately, even before he reached the counter, the haunted look in his eyes telling her that something catastrophic had happened. And though Adam didn't speak, Sharon had always been skilled at reading the undercurrents of his emotions, so she gently guided him to a quiet corner booth and sat across from him, waiting without pressing until finally, after several minutes of him staring into the latte he hadn't touched, Adam spoke in a low, fractured voice that Connor might not be biologically his. Sharon froze for a split second, not because she was shocked that secrets existed in Adam's world, but because she knew how deeply Adam's identity as a father anchored him, and she immediately understood that this wasn't just a question of DNA. It was a catastrophic emotional upheaval that could leave scars lasting longer than most people realized. And when Adam told her how the DNA tests had come back mismatched, how Chelsea had known for years and never said anything, how the secret had been built into the foundation of their lives, Sharon felt anger on his behalf but also compassion for Chelsea, because secrets in Genoa City were rarely born from malice alone. They usually came from fear, love, desperation, or tragic attempts to prevent pain. But Adam didn't want to hear justifications, not yet, not while the betrayal was still bleeding emotionally, so Sharon simply listened, understanding that what he needed most was a space to be heard. Without judgment, as he spoke, his voice cracked when he admitted the part that terrified him the most. The idea that Connor might stop seeing him as his father once the truth came out, that the bond he fought so hard to protect could be damaged beyond repair by biology and narrative, and Sharon leaned forward, reminding him that fatherhood wasn't defined by a strand of DNA but by years of love, sacrifice, and commitment. But while Adam appreciated the sentiment, he couldn't stop the intrusive fear that Matt, now revealed as the biological father, would swoop into the situation and disrupt everything, and that possibility sat like a stone in his stomach. Meanwhile, Chelsea remained at the hospital, pacing the room with her hands shaking, unable to think of what her next move should be. The sound of machines and distant voices doing nothing to steady the anxiety crushing her chest, because she knew this was only the beginning, the first domino in a chain of consequences she had avoided. 4 years, and with Adam gone, she didn't know whether to chase him or give him space, and in her paralysis she began replaying the past in her mind, the mistakes, the rationalizations, the hopes that she could rewrite reality simply by never speaking the truth, and she felt like a fool for thinking that secrets stayed buried in Genoa City, when decades of history suggested otherwise. But her fear had been so deeply ingrained that silence seemed the safest choice, even as it built a time bomb. Beneath the life she shared with Adam, she sat down and whispered to herself that Adam had always been the better man for Connor, the steadier foundation, even when he was flawed, even when their lives were chaotic, and that she had truly believed protecting Connor meant protecting Adam's place in his life. And she thought of Matt, who had once been a fleeting attachment, a temporary emotional shelter during a period when Adam had been distant, self-destructive, and unreachable, a time when she believed the two of them were finished forever, and she had convinced herself that telling either man the truth would rip apart the fragile healing she hoped they could achieve someday. But now that day had arrived through force rather than choice, and every tear she shed in that still hospital room felt like a confession she should have delivered years earlier. At Newman Enterprises, Victor received a call he didn't understand at first, a cryptic update from the hospital requesting that someone from the family contact him regarding medical matters concerning Connor. And while the staff attempted to avoid specifics, Victor's business-honed instincts told him something was wrong. Not business wrong but family wrong. And that kind of crisis always took priority in his world, so without hesitation Victor called Adam, who of course didn't answer, leaving Victor to demand clarity from the hospital until finally a nurse, under the pressure of the Newman name and the urgency in Victor's voice, cautiously explained that further genetic testing had produced unexpected results, and that Chelsea and Adam were dealing with the emotional fallout privately. Victor's eyebrows tightened immediately, because the only kind of genetic shock that could reduce Adam to radio silence was one involving paternity, and Victor, the patriarch whose identity was built on bloodlines, legacy, and the Newman name, felt a coldness settle through him, and for a moment, he didn't know whether he was more angry, confused, or fearful for his son. Victor hung up and immediately informed Nikki in a clipped tone that something serious was happening, and though she tried to get details, he was already on his way out the door, determined to find answers himself, and part of him was already bracing for the likely scenario that someone had betrayed Adam deeply, because that was the only wound capable of destabilizing him at this scale, and Victor found himself quietly praying, something he rarely did, that Connor was not the casualty of someone else's deception. Meanwhile, Adam finished his story to Sharon and sat in quiet turmoil as her words offered calm guidance, urging him to breathe, to remember that grief was valid, that betrayal wound even the strongest, and that even now, the truth did not erase the bond he and Connor had built, but Adam struggled to absorb that because he felt cracked down the middle, his sense of identity twisting into something raw and unfamiliar. He leaned back and whispered that he didn't know how to face his son, how to look him in the eye without feeling like a fraud, and Sharon gently reminded him that Connor would need stability, guidance, and emotional grounding more than ever, and Adam was still his father in every meaningful sense, even if science said otherwise, and that he needed to separate his grief from the responsibility he still held as Connor's emotional anchor. In that moment, Sharon's words offered a tiny island of clarity in the storm, and Adam realized she was right. He couldn't vanish, couldn't abandon the boy just because the world had changed around them, but first he needed to regain the composure to speak to him without breaking. Back at the hospital, Chelsea finally forced herself to make a decision and left the room, heading to the nurse's station to request a moment alone with Connor when he woke up, desperately wanting to explain the truth in her own words before Adam did, because she feared that Adam's heartbreak and anger, not unjustified, but understandably overwhelming, might deliver the truth in a way that traumatized Connor more than necessary. But the nurses told her that Connor was still asleep and that Adam had full medical access as well, meaning she couldn't prevent him from seeing their son first. And she felt powerless all over again. Victor found Adam at Crimson Lights shortly afterward, storming through the doorway with his usual determination. And when he saw Adam slumped in the booth across from Sharon, he didn't even hesitate before approaching, demanding to know what was happening. But Sharon placed a hand on Victor's arm and whispered in a tone that dared him not to argue that this wasn't the moment for confrontation, that Adam was hanging on by a thread, and Victor paused long enough to truly look at his son, really look, and the defeated posture, the pain etched into his face, told Victor far more than any medical report could. He sat down slowly and said Adam's name softly, the kind of voice Victor only used with family when the situation surpassed business and landed in the realm of soul-deep crisis, and Adam swallowed hard before finally saying the words he never imagined he would speak aloud. Connor might not be mine, and Victor inhaled sharply, the sentence hitting him like a silent gunshot, because to Victor, the Newman family legacy wasn't just wealth, it was blood, lineage, the passing of power from one generation to the next. And to learn that the child Adam had proudly raised as his biological son might not be genetically part of the Newman line was a seismic shift in his universe. His first reaction was anger, sharp and immediate, his mind already assuming that Chelsea had betrayed Adam, and Adam confirmed it with a hollow nod, explaining that Chelsea had known for years and never told him, that the truth only surfaced due to unexpected medical tests that revealed genetic mismatches, and Victor's eyes narrowed with quiet fury. Not the explosive kind that shattered rooms, but the colder, more dangerous kind that calculated consequences, because Victor Newman believed in loyalty and truth, at least in matters of blood, and Chelsea had broken both. Sharon quickly spoke up before Victor could escalate the emotional temperature, reminding him that Adam was not the enemy here and that anger, while understandable, would not help, and for once Victor listened, gripping Adam's shoulder and telling him that whether Connor carried Newman DNA or not, Adam was still his father, and the Newman family would protect him as such, but Adam shook his head, saying Victor didn't understand, that this changed everything, legally, emotionally, structurally, and that Connor might one day want to know his biological father, something Adam wasn't sure he could survive emotionally. Victor's expression darkened slowly, and he promised that Matt would not take Adam's place, not if Victor had anything to say about it, but Adam quickly reminded him that this wasn't a corporate hostile takeover. This was a boy's life, and that brute force wasn't the solution, and for a moment Victor sat in visible internal conflict, torn between his instinct to defend his bloodline and his instinct to protect his son from further heartbreak. Meanwhile, Chelsea stepped outside the hospital to get air and was stunned to see Nick approaching, having been tipped off by hospital staff that something was happening and that Adam and Chelsea were involved, and Nick, who had a long and complicated history with both of them, immediately sensed that this wasn't the usual relationship conflict, and when Chelsea's tears began pouring again, Nick gently pressed her for the truth, telling her he couldn't help or offer advice unless he knew what was going on, and Chelsea, exhausted and emotionally stripped of defenses, confessed everything: how she had slept with Matt during a period of separation from Adam, how she learned she was pregnant shortly afterward, how she convinced herself that Connor was Adam's because she wanted that reality to be true, and how she carried that secret for years thinking she was protecting everyone, only to now have it blow up catastrophically in a way she never expected. And Nick, who had seen countless scandals unfold in Newman orbit over the decades, was stunned into silence, not because secrets were rare but because this one cut so deeply at the heart of Adam's identity. And Nick, who had his share of resentment toward Adam over the years, couldn't deny that Adam genuinely loved Connor beyond ego, beyond status, beyond names etched on corporate towers. And Nick told Chelsea that while he understood her fear, she should have told Adam sooner, because the longer a secret sits, the more it poisons everything around it. And Chelsea broke down again, saying she knew that now, but at the time she truly believed ignorance was protection, even though hindsight painted it as betrayal. Back at Crimson Lights, Victor finally asked the question that had been looming: where is Connor in all of this? And Adam replied that Connor hadn't been told yet, that he didn't know how to say the words, that he didn't want his son's world to collapse the way his had, and Victor nodded, understanding that the next steps had to be taken carefully, strategically, emotionally aligned rather than reactionary. And Sharon suggested that when the time came, Connor should hear the truth from both parents together, calmly, united, not from a place of anger or blame. And Adam admitted she was right but didn't know if he had the strength yet, because every time he imagined telling Connor the truth, he felt like he was ripping out a piece of himself. As the emotional storm expanded across Genoa City, another ripple formed. Matt himself, unaware that the past he had moved on from was about to reopen with more force than anyone expected, received a message from a colleague in town requesting temporary consulting work at the Genoa City Hospital, meaning that fate was, without anyone knowing it yet, steering the biological father closer to the center of the fallout. And though Matt had no idea that his life was about to collide with Adam's in the most dramatic and unexpected way, soap opera destiny was already aligning the pieces so that when the truth reached him, the explosion would be impossible to contain.